There are moments in life when everything feels heavier than it should be. Situations that repeat themselves, challenges that arise without warning, and deep feelings that few people can understand. Some souls go through experiences that go beyond the ordinary, as if they were being tested constantly. These experiences do not appear by chance. They are part of a spiritual process that requires inner strength, awareness, and virtue to keep going, even when the path seems lonely and difficult. Virtuous souls usually face dilemmas that are not visible to everyone. They feel more, think more, and carry emotional responsibilities they did not always ask for. Many times they need to choose between following what is easy or remaining faithful to what they feel is right. These dilemmas generate deep inner conflicts, silent questions, and nights of reflection. However, it is precisely in these moments that the essence of these souls is shaped and strengthened. Each spiritual dilemma carries a hidden lesson. Some test patience, others challenge faith, while some require detachment, forgiveness, or courage to move forward alone. It is not about purposeless suffering, but about growth through experience. Only souls truly committed to evolution can go through these challenges without losing their integrity. They fall, get up, and continue on, even when no one notices the weight they carry inside. If you have ever felt that your journey is more intense than that of most people, perhaps this message is for you. My name is George, and I share content like this to help you better understand your spiritual path. If this theme made sense to you, follow the channel and keep watching, because there are still many signs, dilemmas, and truths that need to be revealed. The loneliness of truth. One of the hardest spiritual dilemmas a virtuous soul faces is the loneliness of truth. At a certain point in life, this soul begins to see beyond appearances. It perceives patterns, intentions, and realities that many prefer to ignore. This awakening does not come accompanied by applause, but by distance. The more clarity arises, the less identification there is with what once seemed normal. Loneliness is born when the soul understands that it can no longer pretend to agree with what does not make sense. Superficial conversations, empty values, and repeated behaviors begin to bother it. The person even tries to fit in again, but something inside does not allow it. It is not arrogance, it is internal coherence. Remaining where there is no truth begins to generate a deep discomfort. This dilemma is painful because the human being needs connection. The virtuous soul misses being understood, of sharing what it perceives without being judged or called exaggerated. Many times it remains silent to avoid conflicts, but this silence also weighs. Being alone in the midst of many people is one of the most difficult experiences on this path. Over time, this soul learns that loneliness is not punishment, but a consequence of living with awareness. Not everyone is ready to see, and trying to force this vision only creates frustration. Spiritual maturity arises when the person accepts that each one awakens in their own time. Not everyone will walk by your side, and that is okay. The loneliness of truth also teaches emotional autonomy. The virtuous soul learns to sustain its convictions without needing external validation. It discovers strength in silence and clarity in its own company. This process does not eliminate the pain, but transforms it into understanding. In the end, this dilemma shapes integral people. Souls that prefer to be alone rather than live a lie. That choose inner peace instead of social acceptance. The loneliness of truth hurts, but it also sets free. It prepares the soul for more real connections, even if they are few. The temptation to give up. Another deep dilemma faced by virtuous souls is the constant temptation to give up. Not to give up on life, but on the effort, the struggle, and the attempt to do good in a world that often seems indifferent. These souls give a lot of themselves, feel intensely, and hope that their actions will make a difference. When that does not happen, weariness sets in. The temptation to give up arises after successive disappointments, helping and not being recognized, trusting and being hurt, acting truthfully and receiving ingratitude. All of this wears one down. In silence, the soul begins to wonder if it is worth continuing to be who it is. The conflict is not external, it is internal. It fights against the urge to close off and harden. This dilemma is dangerous because it does not appear dramatically. It manifests as discouragement, apathy, and lack of hope. The soul keeps functioning, but without sparkle. It keeps doing what needs to be done, but without believing as much. It is a silent giving up, which slowly steals the essence. What prevents the virtuous soul from giving up completely is something it cannot erase: its conscience. Even tired, it knows that abandoning its values would be a betrayal of itself. This conflict generates suffering, but also growth. The soul learns that it cannot rely only on external results. Over time, understanding arises that doing good does not guarantee immediate rewards. The true reward lies in remaining faithful to one's own essence. The soul learns to act without expectation, to help without exhausting itself, and to choose battles with more wisdom. The temptation to give up does not disappear completely, but it loses strength. The virtuous soul understands that resting is not giving up. Pausing is not failing. It moves forward, not because everything has improved, but because it decided not to abandon who it really is. The fear of judgment. The fear of judgment is a constant dilemma for virtuous souls. They feel deeply, think differently, and act based on conscience, not approval. This inevitably draws attention, often not positive attention. Questions, criticism, and rejection arise simply because the soul does not fit the expected patterns. This fear begins early. The soul realizes that by being authentic, it bothers others. By saying what it thinks, it is misunderstood. By acting with sensitivity, it is seen as weak. Over time, the impulse arises to hide, to adapt, to dim its own light, to avoid conflicts and judgments. The dilemma lies in choosing between being who you are or being accepted. This choice is not simple. The desire for belonging is strong, and judgment hurts. Many virtuous souls spend years trying to balance authenticity and acceptance, until they realize that this balance, most of the time, does not exist. When the soul begins to silence itself to avoid criticism, something inside becomes sick. The energy diminishes, joy is lost, and a sense of internal falseness arises. External judgment passes, but internal judgment remains. This is one of the hardest lessons of this dilemma. With spiritual maturity, the soul understands that it will always be judged, no matter what it does. If it acts truthfully, it will be criticized. If it hides, it will be unhappy. This understanding sets it free. The fear of judgment loses power when the soul chooses its own peace as a priority. In the end, the virtuous soul learns that it did not come to please everyone, but to live with integrity. The judgment of others says more about them than about the one being judged. When this truth is assimilated, the soul is strengthened and begins to walk more lightly, even while being seen, questioned, or misunderstood. The sacrifice of the ego. The sacrifice of the ego is one of the most painful spiritual dilemmas a virtuous soul faces. The ego offers identity, protection, and a sense of control. It says who we are, what we deserve, and how we should be seen. However, on the spiritual path, There comes a time when the ego becomes an obstacle. The soul begins to realize that many of its pains come from the need for recognition, to be right, or to be validated. This dilemma arises when the person understands that growing spiritually requires letting go of certain certainties. It is not about self-annihilation, but about no longer reacting to everything as a personal offense. The ego wants to win arguments, prove points, and maintain images. Conscience, on the other hand, seeks peace, coherence, and truth. This internal conflict is intense and confusing. For the virtuous soul, letting go of the ego hurts because it means accepting that it will not always be understood, recognized, or valued. It means acting correctly even when no one sees. It means accepting that not every injustice will be immediately repaired. The ego resists because it feels it is losing space, and this resistance generates suffering. During this process, the soul goes through moments of emptiness. What once gave identity ceases to make sense. Opinions, labels, and external expectations lose strength. It is as if something is dying internally, and in fact it is. It is the old identity based on pride and comparison being dissolved. Over time, the soul understands that sacrificing the ego is not losing, but gaining freedom. The need to prove something disappears. Impulsive reactions diminish. Inner peace begins to occupy the space once dominated by conflicts. The soul learns to act from conscience, not vanity. This dilemma deeply transforms those who go through it. The virtuous soul begins to live with more lightness, fewer expectations, and more clarity. The sacrifice of the ego does not make it weak, but firm. It stops fighting to be seen and starts to live truthfully, even if in silence. The pain of empathy. The pain of empathy is a common dilemma among virtuous souls, especially those with heightened emotional sensitivity. These people not only understand the pain of others, they feel it. Other people's emotions cross their internal boundaries with ease, as if there were no clear separation between what is their own and what belongs to the other. From early on, these souls realize that they are deeply affected by the suffering around them. Stories of pain, injustice, or loss do not go unnoticed. They carry these emotions with them, reflecting, trying to help, seeking solutions. Many times they feel responsible for relieving pains they did not cause and that they cannot fully solve. The dilemma arises when empathy ceases to be only understanding and becomes a burden. The soul begins to feel emotionally overwhelmed, tired for no apparent reason, drained after simple interactions. It wants to help, but does not know how to protect itself. The desire to hold space for others comes into conflict with the need to preserve its own energy. This type of soul often blames itself for not being able to do more. When someone suffers, it feels it should have said something different, done something more, been more present. This constant self-demand generates wear, and in some cases, leads to isolation as a form of defense. Over time, the virtuous soul learns that empathy without limits leads to exhaustion. It understands that feeling the other does not mean carrying the other. True empathy involves conscious presence, not total absorption. This learning is difficult, as it requires letting go of the idea of saving everyone. When this dilemma is understood, empathy is transformed. The soul remains sensitive, but more balanced. It learns to listen without losing itself, to help without self-annihilation. Thus, its empathy ceases to be a constant source of pain and becomes a healthy and sustainable gift. The struggle against injustice. The struggle against injustice is a dilemma that weighs heavily on virtuous souls. They have a very clear inner sense of what is right and wrong. Situations of abuse, inequality, or dishonesty provoke intense reactions. It is not indifference they feel, but silent revolt and a desire for change. This dilemma begins when the soul realizes that the world does not always reward integrity. Unjust people prosper, lies are normalized, and correct attitudes seem to be ignored. This generates deep frustration. The soul wonders whether it is worth continuing to act rightly when everything around it seems incoherent. The internal struggle arises between acting or preserving one's own peace. Confronting injustices requires energy, exposure, and often conflicts. Remaining silent generates guilt. Speaking up generates wear. The virtuous soul finds itself divided between the desire to make a difference and the exhaustion of constantly fighting. This dilemma can lead to moral exhaustion. The person begins to feel anger, impatience, and even bitterness, emotions that do not match their essence. The internal conflict intensifies, for they do not want to become what they criticize, but they also do not accept omitting themselves. With maturity, the soul learns that it cannot fight all injustices alone. It understands that choosing battles is a form of wisdom, not cowardice. Not every silence is omission, and not every reaction is awareness. When this balance is reached, the soul fights in a more strategic and healthy way. It acts where it can, inspires by example, and preserves its integrity. Thus, it transforms the struggle against injustice into a path of awareness, not of self-destruction. Spiritual doubt. Spiritual doubt is a dilemma that haunts many virtuous souls in silence. Contrary to what many think, these souls do not live in constant certainty. On the contrary, they deeply question their faith, their purpose, and even the meaning of everything they experience. This doubt is not born from disbelief, but from the genuine desire to understand something greater than reason itself. At certain moments, the soul feels it has lost the connection. Prayers seem empty, signs do not appear, and the path becomes confusing. The feeling of walking alone without clear answers arises. This spiritual emptiness is frightening because the virtuous soul usually relies on faith to go on. When it fails, everything seems unstable. The dilemma intensifies when the soul blames itself for doubting. It believes that questioning is a sign of weakness or ingratitude. However, this view only deepens the internal conflict. Doubt, in fact, is part of spiritual maturing. It breaks fragile beliefs so that more solid truths can arise. During this process, the soul revisits everything it believed. Old ideas cease to make sense, while new understandings slowly begin to form. This period is uncomfortable because it does not offer immediate answers. It is a terrain of uncertainties where the soul needs to learn to trust, even without guarantees. Over time, the virtuous soul realizes that doubt does not destroy faith, but purifies it. It removes illusions, unrealistic expectations, and external dependencies. Faith ceases to be based on promises and begins to be built on direct experience, on living, and on awareness. When it goes through this dilemma, the soul becomes firmer, not because it has all the answers, but because it has learned to walk even with questions. Spiritual doubt, when welcomed, transforms into wisdom and strengthens the connection with something truer and deeper. The conflict between light and shadow. Every virtuous soul carries within itself light and shadow. The dilemma arises when it believes it must completely eliminate its shadowy parts to be spiritually worthy. Emotions such as anger, envy, fear, and resentment cause intense guilt, for they conflict with the image of goodness that this soul tries to uphold. This conflict generates repression. The soul tries to hide what it considers inappropriate, denying feelings and thoughts. However, what is denied does not disappear. On the contrary, it gains strength in the unconscious. The struggle against one's own shadow becomes exhausting and painful, creating a constant sense of inadequacy. The virtuous soul suffers because it thinks it should be better than it is. It demands emotional and moral perfection from itself, forgetting that the human condition involves imperfections. This dilemma generates silent wear, for living while denying parts of oneself is living fragmented. The process of integration begins when the soul understands that shadow is not evil, but wounded, ignored, or misunderstood parts. Anger may be a boundary not respected, fear may be self-protection, and envy may indicate repressed desires. Looking at the shadow with honesty requires courage. This is one of the most transformative dilemmas, for it forces the soul to abandon the illusion of perfection. By accepting its shadow, it becomes more whole, more human, and more compassionate with itself and with others. Light ceases to be a mask and becomes a conscious choice. When this conflict is resolved, the virtuous soul understands that it did not come to be perfect, but whole. True light is born from integration, not denial. It is in this balance that spiritual authenticity and inner peace arise. The cost of awareness. The cost of awareness is one of the most silent and heavy dilemmas of virtuous souls. The more awareness a soul develops, the more it perceives the complexity of the world, of people, and of itself. This perception broadens empathy, but also increases pain. Ignoring is no longer an option. The soul begins to see injustices, manipulations, and sufferings that previously went unnoticed. It understands hidden motivations, behavior patterns, and emotional consequences. This clarity brings responsibility. Knowing more means no longer being able to pretend it did not see. This dilemma weighs because awareness cannot be turned off. The soul feels it carries an invisible burden, for it perceives what many ignore. At times, it feels nostalgic for ignorance, for the lightness of not perceiving so much. But this path has no return. The cost also appears in relationships. The conscious soul can no longer maintain bonds based on lies, emotional games, or superficiality. This generates distance and loneliness. Awareness demands coherence, and this is not always comfortable for those around. Over time, the soul learns that awareness is not suffering in itself. Suffering arises when it tries to carry everything alone. Developing awareness also involves learning to let go, to accept limits, and to understand that it cannot change everything or everyone. When this dilemma is integrated, the soul begins to use its awareness as a tool of balance, not of burden. It acts with discernment, chooses its battles better, and learns to live with more serenity. The cost of awareness continues to exist, but is now accompanied by wisdom and purpose. Have you faced any of them? This question seems simple, but it carries a deep weight. Many times, only when hearing these dilemmas described in words, does the soul recognize what it has always felt, but never managed to explain. There are experiences that are not common to everyone, challenges that seem to arise only for those who feel too much, think too much, and carry a more awakened consciousness. Perhaps you have recognized the loneliness of truth in your own life, when you realized you could no longer agree with everything just to fit in. Or perhaps you have felt the temptation to give up, not on life, but on trying to be just in a world that often rewards the opposite. These moments leave silent marks, as they are rarely understood by those who have never gone through them. It may be that the fear of judgment has limited your actions for a time. The fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or criticized may have made you hide important parts of who you really are. Many virtuous souls learn early to keep quiet, not for lack of opinion, but due to excess sensitivity. And that takes a high internal toll. If you have come this far, It is because this message touched something deep within you. These dilemmas do not appear by chance in someone's life. They arise for those who feel more, think deeply, and carry a consciousness that does not accept living on autopilot. Recognizing these challenges is already a sign of spiritual maturity and inner courage. Many times those who face these dilemmas believe they are alone, different, or even wrong for feeling so much. But the truth is that these experiences reveal a soul in growth. Each internal conflict, each doubt, and each moment of silence is part of a greater process of understanding and alignment with one's own essence. None of this was in vain. Maybe you identified with only one of these dilemmas, or maybe with several. It does not matter. Each recognition is a step towards self-knowledge. The important thing is to realize that you do not need to carry everything alone, nor ignore what you feel. These challenges do not ask for perfection. They ask for awareness, balance, and honesty with yourself. Now I want to hear you. Have you ever faced any of these spiritual dilemmas? Which one has most marked your journey? Sharing your experience can help other people who are going through the same process, but still cannot put it into words. Sometimes, a simple comment creates connection, comfort, and clarity for those who are in silence. Leave your comment telling what you felt, what you recognized, or what you are still trying to understand. Your story matters, and your experience can make more difference than you imagine. Keep walking with awareness, respecting your time and your sensitivity. And remember, you are not alone on this journey.